Good morning to all of you. Uh, Now let's start. Am I visible and audible? Slides
Yes,
are
sir. Good
visible.
morning.
Are the slides visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I am audible. Okay, now let's start. Yesterday we have discussed about this project planning, where we have seen one of the major component is estimation. So the items or the what parameters they need to be estimated are what will the effort required, what will the cost required, what will the size of the what will the size of the software like this. So what time will be required. So these parameters need to be estimated. So today we'll discuss in detail about this project estimation. Okay, so different project estimation techniques you will see. I had already told you that this will be relevant to the step 5 of our step diagram. Okay. Please mute your microphones so that there will no noise. So today we'll basically see a taxonomy of the different estimating methods available right now. Then we'll see a little bit about the size estimation. So first let's see a taxonomy of the different existing methods, the different existing what estimation methods. So first category is top-down versus bottom-up methods. Under this, we'll see activity-based methods, analytical methods for estimation. Then we'll see parametric or algorithmic models. Okay, parametric versus algorithm models. Here you will see example is function points. We'll see the expert judgment techniques for estimation, such as just by guessing, we'll estimate what will the size required or cost required. Another is analogy based. So they are basically case based and comparative based. Then is last one is price to win. This is the most easiest way. One of the another method for estimation is price to win. So we'll start with the price to win because this is the most easiest method. Let's start with price to win. Then we'll try to cover at least the basic things. Please see, remember what we are doing actually till now. The syllabus was a little bit easy, straightforward. From today onwards, we are going into deeper, little bit difficult. Please try to understand carefully. Read the same thing in the same day. Any doubt, you please ask me inside the class or at next day on the next day at the beginning of the class. Today onwards, important contents are there to understand. As I have already told you, let's start with pricing to win. So we can say that price to win, this method is based on the following fact. Price to win method means it is setting a target which is likely to win the business when tendering for work. So when you are participating in tendering, you have to estimate as follows. How? You have to set a target. Okay, the estimation is done by setting a target. The estimation is done by setting a target which is very likely to win the business. You can get the contract, you can get the tender. So price to win is setting a target which is likely to win the business when you are participating in the tendering. Here the project cost, whatever the customer can spend in it, isn't it? The project, what will the project cost? The project cost the amount, whatever the customer can spend on it, whatever the client can spend on it. This is the simplest method of estimation, ma'am. The advantage is that since you are deliberately setting a target, deliberately will try to target the cost, you will put very less. So advantages is it is highly possible that you can get the contract because you are setting the target, and you will definitely try to keep the target which is achievable, like less cost, less time, etc. So advantage is that you may get the contract. Disadvantage is that the cost, they do not accurately reflect the work required. Okay, the cost that you will just guess or you will just say, they may not accurately reflect the work that will be required. So here either the customer does not get the desired system because suppose you have deliberately made the cost very less. Then what will happen? So whatever the quality of the work you cannot maintain. So here either the customer does not get the desired system, the quality system as he wishes, or the customer overpays. You will just, for a very simple thing, you have charged a little bit high and the customer which if he could have gone to some other what vendor, he could have got some with a less price. So either the customer does not get the desired system, or the customer overpays for the work done. This approach may seem unethical and unbusiness. Okay, so this pricing win because you are deliberately setting the target. There is no actually proper estimation you are using. This approach may seem very much unethical and unbusiness, like okay, isn't it? This may seem very much unethical and unbusiness because you are deliberately changing. You are setting the target just to impress the client, or so you are putting this thing. So this is very much unethical and unbusiness. However, when detailed information is lacking, it may be the only appropriate strategy. When you don't have any detailed information regarding the project, the characteristics, the parameters, no information is available or very few information is available. However, when detailed information is lacking, then this pricing to win method may be considered as the only appropriate strategy, because you don't have any other information to estimate, because estimation means it requires some parameters, and these parameters are not known right now. So then if pricing to win is the unethical approach, then which is the most ethical approach? The project, so an approach is the most ethical approach where the project cost it is agreed on the basis of an outline proposal and the development is constrained by that cost. Okay, so that proposal is an ethical approach where the project cost, it is agreed on what? It is agreed on the basis of an outline proposal. There is an outline proposal. An outline proposal exists. Based on that, you are estimating the cost, and the development is constrained by that cost. The software development, it is constrained by this project cost. A detailed specification may be negotiated or an evolutionary approach used for system development. So what is the detailed specification of the system? That is being negotiated with whom? Between the client and the developer. Or you may use an evolutionary approach. Time to time you will just see the updated information. You may use an evolutionary approach for the system development. So then if these two conditions are followed, then we say that that approach is an ethical approach. So then, as I have already told you, this method is applicable when detailed information is lacking. That means for estimating, you require some parameters. Let's see what are the parameters they are required to estimate the factors such as cost, time, etc. So let's see what are the project parameters they need to be estimated. For project planning, we need to estimate two important things: effort. That if you can compute the effort, if you can estimate the effort, ultimately from the effort you can estimate the cost. Then we want to estimate the duration. How much time will require to develop the software, or to develop the project? It is very much hard to estimate the effort or the cost or the duration directly from a problem description. If your SRS document is given, the problem description, the problem specification, it is very much difficult to estimate either the effort or the cost or the duration. But this effort and duration, they can be measured indirectly in terms of the project size. Okay, directly you cannot estimate the effort or cost or the duration from the problem description of the SRS document. However, they can be measured, they can be estimated indirectly in terms of the project size. So this is in terms of the project you can do. So this is an indirect metric using which you can estimate this effort and the cost. Okay, so effort and duration we can call that their indirect metric, because they cannot be directly estimated. They can be estimated, they can be measured in terms of project size. So now then, which is the fundamental measure of any work? Which is the fundamental estimation of work? Direct estimation, size. Okay, size is the fundamental measure, or it the basic measure. Okay, size is the fundamental measure or the basic measure or the basic metric of the work or that software that you want to develop. It is based on the based on the estimated size, you can compute two parameters, that is the effort and ultimately cost, as well as the duration. Okay, so based on the estimated size, you can compute effort and duration. If you have computed effort, if you have estimated effort, then you can easily estimate the cost from the effort. So now effort, how it is measured? Yesterday I have already told, effort is measured in terms of person month or man month or staff month. These terms are interchangeably, you can use person month, staff month, or man month. Okay. So not exactly month. There is a difference between month and person month. So effort is measured in person months. Yesterday I have told that 30 persons working for one day is not same as one person is working for 30 days. There is a difference. Yesterday I have told what is the how the person month was calculated. So 19 working days, and per day 8 hours. So 19 into 8, I think 152 hours. So in that way, person month is calculated. So 1 person month roughly it will be 152 hours. Yesterday we have discussed. So effort is measured in terms of person months. I have already told you that 1 person month is the effort. Let's define how we will define 1 person month or 1 PM. 1 person month is the effort that an individual can typically put in a month. Okay. So 1 person month, it is the effort that an individual can typically put in a month. Because obviously Saturday, Sunday you will take what rest. So like that, that's why it is calculated at 19 into 8. So 1 person month is the effort that an individual can typically put in a month. So I have already told you size is the fundamental measure. From size I can compute effort, and from size I can compute effort the duration. If you know the effort, automatically you can estimate the cost. So this is how these are the project parameters need to be estimated. So what is size? I have already told you. Size is the fundamental measure of work. So project size is a measure of the problem complexity in terms of the effort and time required to develop the project. Okay. So project size is a measure. It is a metric of the problem complexity, of the software complexity in terms of what? In terms of the effort and the time required to develop the product. Two metrics are popularly used to measure the project size. Let us see what are the two metrics. One is SLOC. You might have known as LOC simply. We call it here as SLOC, which stands for source lines of code. And another is function point FP. So these two metrics we'll see in this class. We'll try to see at least SLOC. Next class we may discuss FP. SLOC is conceptually very much simple, but FP little bit difficult. But nowadays FP is what people prefer FP over SLOC. So SLOC is conceptually is very much simple, but now but FP is nowadays favored over SLOC by the project managers or by people, because SLOC is having several shortcomings. So today we'll discuss the advantages and disadvantages of SLOC. So lines of code, let's see. So lines of code, normally you can change, you can interchangeably what? SLOC, LOC almost the same, lines of code or source lines of code. So what is a line of code? What do you mean by a line of code? So this line of code was originally proposed when the programs were typed on cards with one line per card. Previously people are using punch cards. At that time, in our time, it was coming in examination. Who has developed punch cards? Herman Hollerith, I think. So what is a line of code? So since previously this computer or keyboards or these high level languages are not there, people are writing on what? They are typing the programs on punch cards. So at that time, the definition of lines of code was like this. So line of code was originally proposed when the programs were written, they were typed on cards with one line per card. Every card contains one line. So what happens when statements in Java span several lines, or where there can be several statements on one line? Then this method will fail. Typing programs on postcards, it may be okay for assembly language, low level languages. Okay, because that originally the LOC was originally proposed when the programs are typed on cards with one line per card. For one card, only one line can be written. But what happens when the statements in Java they span several lines, or where there can be several statements on one line? Like high level languages Java, there will be the statements, they can span over several lines. Even if there can be several statements written in one line, then this method that writing on cards, it will fail. Then the proper the definition of lines of code, it will fail while you will write Java programs, etc. So what program should be counted as part of the system? Now, then you have to consider, you are writing a program. What components, what programs can be counted as part of the system? If this is the case, then you may think that the graphical user interfaces, built-in class, they are not part of the system. But nowadays, you just imagine any program without a good GUI, who will use it? People will throw it. So nowadays also we are considering the GUI as an important part of the software. So the lines that we have written for writing the GUI part, that also will be included in the software size. So if you use the lines of code, then these difficulties you will face. Okay. Similarly, you know, nowadays in object-oriented programs there are several built-in classes. So you may write only one line, but actually that will indirectly call so many lines. So if you use LOC, then these problems will arise. Okay. What programs should be counted as part of this? Whether GUI, built-in class, etc., they will be considered as part of the system or not. If we use lines of code, then these problems will appear. Initially, software development consisted of only writing code, isn't it? Previously, when you say software development, it refers to what? Writing the code only. And people are not, you see the traditional programs, very less GUI, almost they are command driven also, very poor GUI, almost no user built-in class. The emphasis is on only writing the actual code for the main program. So that's why lines of code, okay, it was manageable. But nowadays, almost you see this what size of GUI in some cases it is more than what the size of the main program. So in that case, this LOC will fail. So it may be applicable to traditional programs, traditional software. Initially, the software development, it was consisted of only writing codes, but now, while you are writing software, you have to write GUI parts, database parts, then the built-in classes you are using. So now in order to use this code reuse, in order to take the advantage of code reuse, you are using this inheritance, etc. So these things must be considered while you are writing the code. The lines of code should be properly estimated. But if you use this lines of code, then the size may not be properly estimated for these modern programs. Now let's see some terminologies. LOC will say stand for lines of code. KLOC, K for thousands of LOC. KSLOC, thousands of source code. NCKSLOC, new or the changed kilo source lines of code. So these are some of the terminologies associated with lines of code. Few things counterintuitive while you are taking the LOC, while you are using LOC as the measure of size. Like see, as I have already told you, in traditional days, people are using machine level languages or assembly level languages. They are obviously what will happen? What will the regarding size for a small program? You have to write many lines of code if you are using the assembly language or machine level language, which is very much easily written in a less number of lines if you are using high level language. But if you will consider LOC, what is the problem? Lower the level of the language, more productive the programmer is, isn't it? Because for the same thing in C or C++, which can be written in 2 lines, in assembly language you have to write 10 lines. So its meaning of LOC is that lower the level of language, like in machine level language or assembly language, then what will happen? The more productive of the programmer is. Similarly, the more verbose the programmer, the higher the productivity. If a programmer is writing use many verbose, many vocabulary or making it lengthy, it will consider that the productivity of that programmer is high. The more verbose the programmer, the higher the productivity. But actually not true. So these are what counterintuitive of the current definition of LOC. Regarding the first point, I can say that the same functionality takes more code to implement in a lower level language than a high level language. I have already told you, isn't it? You want me to write a program for addition or subtraction or power, the same functionality, it takes more code to implement in a low-level language in comparison to a high-level language. So the first point is obviously counterintuitive with regards to LOC. Similarly, regarding this more verbose, if you are using, you may be considered a better, or you will be considered having higher productivity. So measures of productivity based on lines of code suggest that programmers who write verbose code are more productive than programmers who write compact code. So if you are using verbose code, then according to this definition of LOC, you are more productive. But if those who are writing very compact code, according to this definition, they are having less productivity. So these are counterintuitive with respect to this simple definition LOC. Just lines of code, you are counting the lines of code written in the program. These are some things which are counterintuitive with regards to LOC. Let's quickly look at the major shortcomings of LOC. Here the size can vary with the coding style, isn't it? If you are using assembly language, the LOC might be 100. If you are using a high-level language, it can be 10 like that. So size can vary with coding style also. If you are using coding style like somebody using recursion, somebody without recursion, somebody using pointers, so the size can vary with coding style. So how to compute that? What will the exact what size? So this is one of the shortcomings. If somebody is using what a procedural languages, somebody has used object-oriented language for the same problem, somebody has used without function, somebody has with function, somebody has used recursion, somebody has used what pointers, then the size for the same problem, it may vary when the coding style changes. This LOC focuses only on coding activity alone. It only focuses on coding activity, but you know, in software development we have many other things. Coding is a very few portion. We have to analyze the requirements, requirement analysis, specification. We have to spend a huge amount of time in design, then coding, and after coding we have to test it. So these things are not considered in LOC. LOC correlates very poorly with the quality and efficiency of the code. So what will the quality of the code? What will the efficiency of the code? So LOC correlates very poorly with the quality and efficiency of code. As I have already told you, if you are using high-level language, your size will be less. That means you will be treated as what? You are a less productive programmer. If you are using code reuse by using inheritance, then your project size will be LOC will be less. Then you will be considered a programmer having less productivity. So what does it mean? LOC penalizes higher level programming languages, code use, etc. But actually you are using the advantages of say high level languages or object-oriented languages. But LOC does not recognize that. LOC penalizes high-level programming languages, code reuse, etc. So these are some of the shortcomings of LOC we have seen. So few more shortcomings I have written here. These are easy things you can read from the book. We will go to other things. Like it is difficult to estimate at start of a project from the problem description. If the SRS only given to you, you cannot estimate, or it will be very much difficult to estimate the LOC at the beginning of the project from the SRS document. The only way left is to the only way to estimate is to make a guess. Only by guessing you can estimate what will the approximated SLOC. So it is not very much useful for project planning. These are the drawbacks of SLOC we are discussing. That's why this is not very much useful for project planning. Only it is a code measure. Okay, it is only used as a code measure. Isn't it? Another shortcoming that it is only used as a code measure. It cannot be used to measure how much what will the impact of the requirement analysis design. It doesn't take into account the design. It does not take into account testing and so on. It is programmer dependent, obviously, because if a programmer has written verbose and another program very compactly, then it will say that who has written verbose way, that is the good programmer. So that is another drawback. So it does not consider structural logical complexity. So one of the major drawback of SLOC is that it does not consider what is the structural complexity or the logical complexity of the software. It only measures the lexical or the textual complexity only. It does not consider the structural or the logical complexity of the software. So these are some of the shortcomings of SLOC. That's why people nowadays, they don't prefer SLOC, rather they prefer the other measure that we have seen, that is the function point. So there are some further difficulties with SLOC. You can read yourself, like SLOC can become ambiguous due to rapid changes in programming methodologies, languages, and tools, isn't it? So because now there's a rapid change in programming methodologies, different programming languages, and different tools due to the language advancements, automatic source code generation, etc., custom software and reuse, object orientation, isn't it? These are some of the recent advancements. So SLOC can become very much ambiguous due to the rapid changes in the programming methodology, language, and tools, because nowadays there is a heavy advancement on the languages. Source code generation, automatic source code generation from the design documents, you can automatically generate the source code. Then it is not your report. Then how to compute the SLOC? You know, I hope those who have read software engineering, they might have seen some tools used for drawing UML diagrams, and in our lab RSA is there, Rational Software Architect, that is a tool from IBM, and there is a very good feature in RSA. What is that feature? If you know the UML diagrams, one important diagram is a class diagram. So if in RSA you will draw the class diagram, there is a facility by using which you can generate the skeletal code from the class diagram. Draw the class diagram, then the methods will be there, the objects will be there, then there is a command, you click on that button, automatically the skeletal code will be generated, and then you need to only customize it. So here, how to compute the LOC? You are not writing the lines of code. The system is automatically giving you the code from the class diagram. Then how to compute the LOC? This is one of the drawback of LOC. So automatic source code generation is another drawback or limitation for this LOC. Similarly, custom software and use, when you are customizing the software, some ready-made package is there, you are customizing and the using. Then how to compute the LOC? Another difficulty. Then object orientation features, another important difficulty, because I have already told you the best features of object-oriented programming are what? What are the greatest strengths? The features such as inheritance, polymorphism, dynamic binding, classes, objects, etc. You take the simple example of inheritance. A is inherited from B. Am I writing all the codes of A? Because you know, A is inherited from B means all the methods of B are automatically inherited to A. So I am not writing anything else. So how to compute the SLOC here? So these are greatest features of object-oriented programming, but they pose difficulties while compute the SLOC. So the example I have told, this inheritance, in that case automatically the methods, features of the base class will be class. Then how to compute, what will the exact LOC for the child class? Suppose you have written only draw, and a draw was coming from some method A. So whether the size will be one line? No, because all the methods of the parent class are also automatically inherited. So how to compute this SLOC during the presence of inheritance and polymorphism? So the features of object-oriented programming, they also pose difficulties while computing the SLOC. So these are some further difficulties. Please read yourself. Then you will go to the next technique, that is your expert judgment based technique. There are different expert judgment based techniques such as basic expert judgment, weighted average estimating, consensus estimating, and the Delphi technique. So these are the different expert judgment based techniques. We'll start now one by one. So we'll first see about the basic expert judgment technique. Number one, as its name suggests, expert judgment technique for estimation. How the estimation is carried out here. Here, one or more experts, they predict the software cost. So a meeting will be called, there will be one or more experts. So the one or more experts, they predict the software cost. Then the process iterates until some consensus is reached. So if there are more experts, then they will predict separately. Then they have to come to a common decision. So this process, it iterates until some common consensus decision is reached. Then all the experts, they agree to the some particular value or some particular measure some particular amount or like that, or some particular quantity. Everybody will agree to that. Then the process is finished. So in basic expert judgment technique, one or more experts predict the software cost. The process continues, it iterates until some consensus decision is reached. The advantages of basic judgment technique is that it's very simple. It can be accurate if all the experts have direct experience of similar systems. So whatever experts you have taken, maybe the project managers, if they have direct experience of similar systems, then it is very much advantageous, and the estimation will be very much accurate. The disadvantage is that it will be very much inaccurate if there are no experts available. So if you are doing, suppose a very sophisticated one, maybe what the blast furnace you are controlling, and you have to develop a software, and you want to estimate. And in your project team, no experts who knows how the blast furnace operates, or what the temperature is measured. So if no experts who is there, who can handle or who can understand the blast furnace activities, then obviously the estimation will be inaccurate. This is the drawback of basic expert judgment technique. So now let's see what are the steps followed in this basic expert judgment technique. So as I have already told you, there will be more than one expert normally. Out of all the experts, one expert will be treated as the coordinator. The coordinator presents each expert with a specification and estimation form. Okay, so the basic the coordinator, he will first deliver, he will first give a specification and an estimation form to each expert. Then the coordinator will call a group meeting where the experts, they discuss the estimation issues with the coordinator and among themselves. Then the experts, they fill out the forms given by the coordinator anonymously. Please see, they fill out the forms anonymously, not synonymously. Then the coordinator prepares and distributes the summary of the estimation on an iteration form. Then that will be again circulated to all the experts. Then the coordinator calls a group meeting again, specially focusing on having the experts discuss points where their estimates varied widely. So because the individual estimates coming from the experts, they might vary. So the coordinator calls a group meeting in order to focus on having the experts discuss points where their estimates may have varied widely, so that they can come to a common, or they may come to a consensus point. The experts fill out the forms again anonymously, and steps 4 and 6, they are iterated for as many rounds as appropriate till reaching at a consensus decision. An expert is familiar with and knowledgeable about the application area and the technology. What do you mean an expert? In basic judgment, expert judgment method, the emphasis on experts. What do you mean by an expert? An expert is very much familiar with and knowledgeable about what? About the application area and the technologies. This is very much or particularly appropriate where existing code is to be modified. This method, basic expert judgment technique, is very much appropriate where an existing code is there which needs modification. The current research shows that expert judgment in practice tends to be based on analogy. The current research that shows that the expert judgment technique in practice, it tends to be based on analogy. It is how it works. It is based on some analogy. Analogy to what? Analogy with similar types of projects, or analogy by analyzing or by making analogy with the past projects. Now let's see what are the stages in this what are the stages with this analogy based technique. You identify the significant features of the current project. What are the important features of the current project? Identify them. Then, as I have already told, you are making analogy with what? With previous projects or past projects. Look at the previous projects or past projects with similar features. Then observe the differences between what? Observe the differences between the current project and the past projects. Then determine whether find out or look at the possible reasons for error. If they do not match, you are observing the differences. If they do not match, that means some error is there. Find out the possible reasons for the error or the risk. Then after identifying the possible reasons for the errors, then you take measures to reduce the uncertainty. So there are some risks, some uncertainty are there in the new project. Then you have to take measures, steps to reduce this uncertainty or risks. This is how this analogy-based method it works. So basic expert judgment method, it is based on this analogy methods. The steps of the analogy methods I have told here. Now let's see a little bit deeper about the estimation by analogy. The cost of a project here, it is computed by comparing what? By comparing the project, the current project, to a similar project in the same application domain. That's why it is known as estimation by analogy. What will the advantages of estimation by analogy? It may be accurate if the project data available and the people or the tools the same. This estimation which you got by using the analogy-based method, it may be very much accurate if the project data they are available and the people tools they are the same. That means what is the past what your projects are having. If the project data for the current one it is available and the same kind of people or tool who have developed the previous project, the same category or the same people and the same tool are available here also for the current project. Okay, so the estimation for the current project may be accurate if the project data are available. Current project data and the people tools that are currently they are same as that of the past project. What is the disadvantage? It is impossible if no comparable project has been tackled. If in your previous days no similar project you have handled, obviously how you can make the analogy, because no similar project. One of the drawback. Also another drawback is needs systematically maintained cost database. Whatever project you are using today, you have to immediately store them. You have to maintain them in a database so that next time when similar projects can come, you can make the analogy. So some expenditure, some overhead you have to keep here. You have to spend some more money for saving, for maintaining all those past projects in a database. It needs systematically maintained cost database. Now let's little bit see about the more what the drawbacks of the basic expert judgment technique. It is very much hard to quantify. The estimation is very much hard to quantify. It is hard to document the factors used by the experts or the expert groups. The expert or the group of the experts, the different experts, how they have reached at this decision, how they have made the how they have estimated, what factors they have considered, because it will vary from person to person. It is very much hard to document the factors based on which or using which the different experts or the different experts groups they have reached at this estimation. Experts may be biased. Another important drawback, the experts that we have chosen, they may be biased. Some political pressure may be there. They might be biased towards a particular person or a group of persons. The experts may be biased. They may be optimistic or they may be pessimistic, even though they have been decreased by the group consensus. Okay, they may have been decreased by the group consensus. So these are obviously biasness means the estimation will be incorrect. So these are some of the drawbacks of basic expert judgment technique. Similarly, another technique is that the expert judgment method always complements the other cost estimating methods such as algorithmic method. The expert judgment method, it always complements what? It always complements the other cost estimating methods, for example, algorithmic method. These are some of the drawbacks of the basic expert judgment technique. We'll go to the next one. So we have seen the basic judgment technique. We have also seen the analogy based. Next one is the weighted average estimates. Weighted average estimating is also known as sensitivity analysis estimating. Okay, this is also known as sensitivity analysis estimating. Here, instead of taking only one estimate, we normally take three estimates. One is the best case, another is the worst case, another is the most likely case, that is the median case. So instead of taking one estimate, here three estimates are taken. We'll see while we will discuss spot, we'll see we are using three estimates. At that time part, while discussing, we'll discuss all those things. So in case of weighted average estimates, instead of taking only one value, one estimate, maybe for the cost or the effort, we have to take three estimates. What will the best case value? What will the worst case value? What will the most likely value? This provides a more accurate estimate than when only one estimate used, obviously. When we are taking only one value, that might be the worst case or the best case. So if you are taking three estimates, obviously you will get a more accurate estimate in comparison to the case where only one estimate is considered. These are then used in the following formula. So if you are taking three estimates, best case, worst case, and most likely case, then how will you get the estimate? We have to use the following formula to get the actual estimate. So the estimated effort, okay. So by using these three estimates, the actual estimated effort or the okay, this will be the actual or the appropriate one, the appropriate estimated effort or the approximate estimated effort or the actual estimated effort is equal to O. O means the optimistic case plus 4 times of the most likely case, that is median value, plus P, that means the pessimistic value, divided by 6. So using this formula, you can compute the estimated effort based on the weighted average. So the weighted average estimates, if you use the weighted average estimates method, then you can compute the estimated effort is equal to O plus 4M plus P divided by 6. So then we will discuss about the consensus estimating. So let's see how we can get the consensus value in estimation. The steps in conducting a consensus estimating session are followed like this. So let's see the steps in conducting a consensus estimating session. First, a briefing is provided to the estimating team on the current project. So first, a little bit briefing is given to the estimating team on the project. Then each person is provided with a list of work components to estimate. Okay. Then every person will be provided with a list of different work components to estimate what you want to estimate. So each person will be provided with a list of the different work components to be estimated or to estimate. Each person independently estimates the values of O, M, and P. See, we are taking consensus estimating. That means a group of experts are there, a group of persons are there. So each person independently estimates the value for the optimistic case, most likely case, and the pessimistic case for each work component. The estimates are written up on the whiteboard. Then, so it is so each person is independently determining, estimating the values of O, M, and P for each work component. Then the estimates are written up where? Then the estimates are written up on the whiteboard. Each person discusses the basis and assumptions for their estimates. Why they have chosen the value of O as 10, not 5. So each person discusses the basis and the assumptions or the circumstances for their estimates. Why they have taken the particular values for O, M, and P, they have to justify. So on what basis they have chosen these values, they have to also discuss these things. Then a revised set of estimates is produced because there is a number of persons are there. Each person's estimate may be different than others. So that's why a revised set of estimates is produced. Here a revised set of estimates is produced. Then averages for the OMP and P are calculated because there are a group of persons. So that's why we have to take the average value. So that's why we have to take the average value because a set of values are there. Averages for the O, M, and P values they are calculated. These values are used in the formula. So after getting the average value of O, M and P, then these values can be used that formula where that estimated effort is equal to O plus 4M plus P divided by 6. These average values of O, M and P values are used in that formula. So then that will give you the actual estimate. These values are used in the formula to get the actual estimate. So this is how we are using the consensus estimating. Then we'll see about the Delphi estimation. This is another value, variation of the this expert technique. This is a variation of a consensus estimation technique. Okay, so this Delphi estimation is a variation of this consensus estimation technique. Here, a team of experts and a coordinator is there. So in this method, there is a team of experts, group of experts, and one coordinator is there. The experts carry out the estimation independently. So all the experts, they are given the details of the problem. They carry out the estimation independently. They also mention the rationale, the motivation behind their estimation, why they have chosen these particular values. They mention the rationale behind their estimation. Then the coordinator notes down any extraordinary rationale. So if some expert have used any extraordinary rationale, the coordinator notes down. Then after collecting the reasons from the different experts, then the coordinator notes down any extraordinary rationale. Then the coordinator circulates the estimation rationale among the experts. So the estimation rationale, it is collected from each expert. By whom? By the coordinator. Then the coordinator circulates the estimation rationale among what? Among all the experts. Then experts, they can see each other's estimates. Then they may correct their rationale. Oh, I have done a mistake here. Then they may rethink. Then the experts, they re-estimate their parameters. Please remember here, in Delphi estimation technique, experts never meet each other to discuss their viewpoints. What are their viewpoints? What are their rationale? They do not meet each other. Whatever their data, they give it to the coordinator. Coordinator collects the data, these parameters of the estimates. Then again he circulates to all. Then if somebody has done mistake, then they re-estimate. Coordinator collects these estimates and again circulate. So this process will go on till they reach at a consensus estimation. Okay, till they reach at a consensus estimation. This is how the Delphi estimation method works. So Delphi means actually it is an expert survey into 2 or more rounds. Okay. Delphi is an expert survey in 2 or more rounds. So starting from the second round, a feedback is given. So after the first round is over, starting from the second round, what happens? A feedback is given about what? About the results of the previous rounds. The feedback is given to all experts. Then the experts, they may re-estimate, and this process will be continued till the estimates of the different persons they reach at a consensus point. The same experts assess the same matters once more, isn't it? Because if they might have committed some mistake, the same experts, they assess the same matters once more, influenced by opinions of the other experts. Because by this time, they have known the opinion of other experts. So if there is any correction requires, they make the correction. The same experts assess the same matters once more, influenced by the opinions of other experts. The important is here anonymity, because I have already told you here, the experts never meet each other. So here, the most important point is that anonymity. The experts, they do not meet each other. The important point is anonymity. Okay, this is about the Delphi technique, or this is all about the Delphi estimation technique. Okay. Let's quickly summarize what are the steps in Delphi methods. First, the coordinator presents each expert with a requirement specification and an estimation form. Then the coordinator calls a group meeting in which the experts discuss estimation issues with the coordinator and each other. So actually here, this is I think contradicting. So they may discuss, but they do not say about what their estimates. They may discuss about what are the common points or what so on the project, but they don't disclose about their estimates now here. So actually, I think this step needs correction actually, because in the last step we have seen that the experts, they never meet each other in Delphi estimation. So I think this step should be corrected. We'll see. So only first time before starting the before starting the estimation, all the experts, they may sit once regarding what is the problem, etc. But later on they do not sit, they do not share their viewpoints, etc. with others. The experts, they fill out the forms anonymously. Please see, here I have corrected. The experts fill out the forms anonymously. They don't disclose their estimates. They do not disclose their rationale to others. Coordinator prepares and distributes a summary, because these experts, after filling out this thing, their forms, they are after estimating their estimations, they are after estimating their parameters, or after finding out, after estimating the different parameters, they give it to what? To the coordinator. The coordinator prepares and distributes a summary. Summary of what? The estimation on an iteration form. Then the coordinator may call a meeting, specifically mentioning the noted rationale where the estimates varied widely. Okay, so here the where these things are, the estimations are varying. So he may again circulate the estimates of other experts to the remaining experts. Experts fill out the forms again synonymously, and steps 4 and 6 are iterated for as many rounds as appropriate till a common point till they reach at a common decision. This is how the Delphi method works. So then actually it comes the different types of estimation techniques, such as this top-down, bottom-up, etc. So I think we can stop here, and in the next class we will discuss about the different types of estimation techniques. Thank you very much. So tomorrow we will meet at 4:15 to discuss these things. Any doubt, please? So please have a look into this, and a little bit now we will go into difficult portions. If any doubt, I will take up in the next class maybe. Any doubt, you please ask. The slides I will share. We'll stop here. Attendance I will take it from the system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So I'm disconnecting. So again, we will meet tomorrow at 4:15. Thank you very much. Oh, I have to first.